At Easter lunch, my son-in-law whispered, "Now all that's left is for her to disappear so we can enjoy the inheritance." When I stood up and read the will, he begged me for forgiveness. "Your presence here means so much to me. Watch until the end and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has reached." The warm spring sunlight filtered through my kitchen windows as I put the finishing touches on our traditional Easter lunch. At 60, I'd hosted this family gathering for decades, ever since John and I bought this house. Even after his passing 3 years ago, I kept the tradition alive. "Donna, these deviled eggs are divine," my sister-in-law Margaret commented, helping me arrange them on my mother's antique serving platter. "John's favorite," I replied, feeling that familiar pang whenever I mentioned his name. Some traditions are worth keeping. The house bustled with the comfortable chaos of family. My daughter Sharon chatted animatedly with her cousins in the living room, while her husband Greg entertained the men with tales of his latest business venture. My 2 grandchildren were hunting Easter eggs in the backyard, their delighted squeals floating through the open windows. Everything seemed perfect. The kind of perfect that makes you pause and take a mental snapshot because deep down, you know moments like these are fleeting. If only I'd known just how fleeting. "Dessert's ready," I announced, carrying my signature carrot cake to the table. Everyone gathered around, complimenting the spread as they took their seats. I was returning from the kitchen with the coffee pot when I heard it. Just a whisper, not meant for my ears. Greg leaning close to Sharon, his voice low but distinct in the momentary lull of conversation. "Now we just need her to disappear so we can enjoy the inheritance." The coffee pot trembled in my hand. A splash of hot liquid burned my wrist, but I barely felt it. The room seemed to tilt and narrow, all sound fading except those awful words echoing in my head. Greg's face, my son-in-law of 15 years, wore an expression I'd never seen before. Calculating. Cold. The mask had slipped, revealing something ugly beneath. Sharon didn't look shocked. She didn't defend me. She simply placed her hand over his and whispered, "Not now." Not, "How could you say that?" Not, "That's horrible." Just, "Not now." My cheesecake platter slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor in a mess of porcelain and cream. Everyone turned, their faces showing concern, for the broken dish, not my broken heart. "Mom. Are you okay?" Sharon jumped up, reaching for a napkin. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Instead, I walked steadily to my study, opened the safe behind John's old fishing photographs, and retrieved the envelope that held my will. When I returned to the dining room, conversations halted. I stood at the head of the table, John's place, now mine, and broke the seal on the envelope. "Mom, what are you doing?" Sharon's voice had a nervous edge. I began reading aloud, my voice stronger than I felt. "I, Donna Marie Caldwell, being of sound mind." Greg's face drained of color as I continued reading. The revisions I'd made 6 months ago, after I'd noticed how his questions about my finances had increased, how he'd suggested selling the lake house to simplify my life, how he'd begun bringing up my eventual care needs. When I finished, the silence was absolute. The will left the bulk of my estate to a trust for my grandchildren's education. The lake house would go to my sister's son, who had always loved it as much as John did. Sharon would receive a reasonable sum. Greg was mentioned only as Sharon's spouse, with no direct bequest. "You changed it?" Sharon stammered, her face flushed with embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell which. 6 months ago, I confirmed, refolding the document. When it became clear I was viewed as a balance sheet rather than a mother. Greg stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "Donna, please, I didn't mean it that way. It was a terrible joke. Please." "I heard what I heard," I said quietly, looking into his eyes. And I saw my daughter's response. The room erupted with questions from confused relatives, Sharon's tearful denials, Greg's increasingly desperate apologies. But beneath the chaos, something had crystallized inside me. For the first time since John died, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The illusion of family harmony had shattered, but in its place stood something more valuable: truth. I raised my hand, silencing the room. I think we're done with Easter lunch. Thank you all for coming. As they filed out, some confused, others awkwardly sympathetic, I caught Greg's final, whispered plea to Sharon: fix this. You have to fix this. But some things, once broken, reveal they were never whole to begin with. The house felt unnaturally quiet after everyone left. I moved mechanically through the kitchen, wrapping leftovers that would go uneaten, washing dishes that had held a celebration turned funeral. Not for a person, for an illusion. The doorbell rang at 7:30 that evening. I knew who it would be before I opened the door. Sharon stood on the porch, alone. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back hastily. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I stepped aside wordlessly. We settled in the living room, the space between us on the couch wider than the physical inches. "Mom," she began, what Greg said was completely inappropriate. It was a stupid, thoughtless joke. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The girl who once brought me dandelion bouquets had become a woman I barely recognized. "It wasn't a joke, Sharon," I said quietly. "His only regret is that I heard it." "That's not fair. We've never." "The lake house," I interrupted. "Last Christmas, Greg suggested I sell it because maintenance is too much at my age. Then offered to handle the sale himself." Sharon's eyes darted away. "He was trying to help. The joint account you suggested I open with you, in case of emergency. That's just practical. The constant questions about my retirement portfolio. The brochures for that assisted living facility, when I'm in perfect health." Each example landed like a stone between us. Small things individually, but together they formed a damning pattern I'd been too trusting to see clearly. "Do you know what hurts most?" I asked, my voice finally breaking. "Not what Greg said. It's that you didn't defend me. You said, 'Not now.' Not, 'That's horrible,' or 'How could you?' Just, 'Not now.' As if the sentiment was fine, but the timing was poor." Sharon's shoulders slumped. "I didn't. I don't. How long have you seen me as a checkbook instead of a mother?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and unavoidable. "That's not fair," she whispered, but her protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a photo album. Inside were pictures of the cabin Greg and Sharon had built 5 years ago, the cabin I had contributed $80,000 toward as a family gift. The car I helped them buy when Greg's business was struggling. The family vacation to Hawaii I'd funded as a Christmas gift that somehow became an annual expectation. "I never kept score," I said, flipping through the pages. "I helped because I wanted to. Because I thought we were a family that supported each other. But it's been one way, hasn't it?" Sharon began to cry in earnest now. "Mom, please. We love you. It's not like that." I closed the album. "Then what is it like, Sharon? Explain it to me." Her silence told me everything. "Greg will be back tomorrow, won't he?" I asked. "To apologize properly. To try to fix this." Sharon nodded miserably. "I won't be here," I said. "I'm going to the lake house for a while. I need space to think." "For how long?" "As long as it takes to figure out what's real and what isn't in my life." Sharon stood, panic flashing across her face. "Mom, please don't do anything rash. The will." And there it was. Even now, her concern wasn't for my feelings, but for what might change in my will. "The will stays exactly as it is," I said firmly. "Your children will have their education secured. You will have financial security. But Greg gets nothing directly from me, ever. And neither of you will control anything. This isn't about control. It's exactly about control," I cut in. "My life. My choices. My money." After Sharon left, I sat alone in the growing darkness of the living room. The silence felt different now, not empty, but full of possibility. For 15 years since John died, I'd centered my life around being available for Sharon and her family. I'd measured my worth by what I could provide. That would end now. I packed a small suitcase, called my sister to let her know where I'd be, and left a single note on the refrigerator with my attorney's contact information. As I drove toward the lake house in the soft spring evening, the weight on my chest began to ease. The pain was still there, betrayal cuts deep at any age, but alongside it grew something unexpected, anticipation. For the first time in years, tomorrow wasn't planned around someone else's needs. I didn't know what that would look like yet, but I was finally ready to find out. The lake house welcomed me like an old friend. John and I had bought this modest cabin 30 years ago when property here was still affordable. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and windows that framed the water like living paintings. Over the years, developers had built mansions on either side, but our little slice of shoreline remained wonderfully unchanged. I spent that first morning sitting on the dock, watching the sun climb over the trees. My phone had buzzed relentlessly through the night, Sharon, Greg, even my sister Margaret wondering if I was overreacting. I'd finally turned it off. "Coffee any good out here?" a voice called. I turned to see my neighbor, Eleanor, waving from her garden. She and her husband had the cabin 2 doors down, one of the few original structures left. "Brings me back to life," I replied, raising my mug. Eleanor ambled over, her gardening gloves caked with soil. At 72, she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "Haven't seen you up this early in spring before," she observed, settling beside me on the dock. "Usually you're a summer person." I nodded, watching a pair of mallards glide across the water. Things change. Eleanor didn't press, and that's why I'd always liked her. She simply sat with me in companionable silence until I was ready to speak. "My son-in-law is waiting for me to die so he can inherit my money," I finally said, the words bitter on my tongue. And my daughter didn't contradict him. Eleanor whistled low. "Well, that's a hell of a thing to discover." I laughed despite myself. No platitudes, no awkward consolations. Just acknowledgement of the awful truth. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the betrayal that I hadn't thought much beyond escaping to the lake house. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've changed my will." Beyond that. Eleanor stood, brushing off her pants. "Come by for dinner tonight. Bring that lemon cake you make. I'm having some friends over. Might do you good to meet new people who don't see dollar signs when they look at you." That evening, I found myself in Eleanor's sunroom with 5 other women, all in their 60s and 70s, all vibrant in ways that made me realize how dim my own light had become. "Donna teaches art workshops at the community center," Eleanor announced, though I'd done no such thing. "Oh, I'm not. Not teaching right now," Eleanor smoothly interrupted. "But you will be. They need someone, and you've been painting for years." I hadn't picked up a brush since John died. Sharon had suggested I simplify by donating my art supplies. I'd packed them away instead, unable to part with them but equally unable to face the empty canvas. "I was never professional," I protested weakly. "Neither was I before retirement," said Meredith, a former accountant who now sold her pottery at local fairs. "Sometimes the second act is better than the first." Later, as we shared wine and stories, I realized how my world had shrunk. These women traveled solo to Europe, started businesses, took tango lessons, built new lives after losses. Meanwhile, I'd organized my existence around Sharon's family, my plans secondary to their needs. The next morning, I unearthed my art supplies from the cabin's storage closet. Dust coated everything, but the brushes were still good. I sat up on the deck facing the water and stared at the blank canvas, terrified and exhilarated. The first strokes were hesitant, almost apologetic. But gradually, something awakened, a muscle memory from before grief, before becoming solely Sharon's mother or John's widow. I painted through lunch, through the afternoon thunderstorm, through dinner. When darkness finally forced me to stop, I had created something raw but honest, a sunrise over troubled waters, light breaking through clouds. Days passed. I established new rhythms. Mornings with coffee and Eleanor on the dock. Afternoons painting or helping Meredith at the community center. Evenings with my new circle, laughing more than I had in years. I finally turned my phone back on after a week. 17 missed calls from Sharon. 3 stern voicemails from Greg about family responsibility. 1 message from my attorney, confirming the trust arrangements I'd requested. I called Sharon back. Mom. Finally. We've been worried sick. Her voice held genuine concern mixed with something else, anxiety about her position, perhaps. I'm fine, I said. I needed space. When are you coming home? The kids miss you. I looked out at the lake, at the half-finished canvas on my easel. I am home, Sharon. For now. But I've signed up to teach an art workshop here. Starting next month. Silence, then, art? Since when do you? Since before you were born, I said gently. There's a lot about me you've forgotten. Or perhaps never knew. After we hung up, I sat looking at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back had color in her cheeks, purpose in her eyes. She looked stronger than the woman who had dropped a cheesecake platter on Easter Sunday. That evening, Eleanor handed me a flyer. Senior art exhibition, it announced. Submit your work by June 15th. Not ready for that, I protested. Eleanor shrugged. None of us is ever ready. We jump anyway. I tucked the flyer into my sketchbook, not committing but not refusing either. For the first time in years, I was curious about what might happen next. When Sharon and Greg showed up unannounced the following weekend, expensive wine and forced smiles in hand, I was ready. The woman who greeted them wasn't the same one they'd expected to manipulate back into line. Mom, you look different, Sharon said, eyes taking in my paint-spattered clothes and new shorter haircut. I am different, I replied simply. Come in. But not for long. I have plans tonight. Sharon and Greg perched uncomfortably on my patio chairs, looking out of place in their designer clothes. 6 months had passed since Easter Sunday. The summer heat had given way to autumn crispness, painting the trees around the lake in fiery oranges and reds. The place looks different, Sharon commented, eyeing the easel set up near the windows and the colorful throw pillows that had replaced John's old plaid ones. I'd been making it my own, I replied, pouring coffee into mugs I'd made at Meredith's pottery workshop. They were imperfect but had character, much like my new life. Mom, we've barely seen you all summer, Sharon said, that familiar note of accusation creeping into her voice. The kids keep asking when you're coming home. They're welcome to visit anytime, I said. You all are. I've just been busy. Greg cleared his throat, adopting the conciliatory tone he used when closing business deals. Donna, we know Easter was unfortunate. What I said was completely inexcusable. I waited, watching him squirm under my steady gaze. But it's been 6 months, he continued. Family shouldn't stay estranged this long. The holidays are coming up. What he meant was clear, should resume my previous role as holiday host, gift giver, and financial safety net. My absence had created practical inconveniences in their lives. Sharon reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy brochure. We saw this and thought of you. I took it, already knowing what it would be, some seniors community, some assisted living sales pitch disguised as concern. Instead, I found myself looking at information about a charity art auction in the city. What's this? I asked, genuinely surprised. Sharon smiled tentatively. We heard from Aunt Margaret that you've been painting again. This organization supports art programs for disadvantaged children. We thought, maybe you'd want to submit something? I studied my daughter's face, searching for the ulterior motive, the hidden agenda. There was nervousness there, and something else, a glimmer of genuine effort, perhaps. Why? I asked simply. Sharon glanced at Greg, who nodded encouragingly. Because we realized we haven't seen you, really seen you, in a long time, she said, her voice smaller than usual. Before Dad died, you used to paint all the time. Then you just stopped. Everything became about helping us, and she faltered. I took it for granted. I said nothing, waiting. The auction is next month, she continued. I'm on the committee. It would mean a lot if you participated. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a text message. I glanced down to see Eleanor's name. Don't forget, gallery meeting at 3. Bringing the wine. I have an appointment, I said, standing. I need to get ready. Greg's face fell. They'd expected a longer audience, perhaps even a full reconciliation. Sharon looked at the half-empty coffee mugs with dismay. Already? She asked. We just got here. I'm meeting with a gallery owner, I said, feeling a small thrill saying those words. About my own exhibition. Their matching expressions of shock might have been comical if they weren't so revealing. They had come bearing an opportunity they thought would excite me, never imagining I'd already created opportunities of my own. An exhibition? Greg repeated. Of your paintings? Yes, Greg. Of my paintings. Sharon stood, visibly recalibrating. That's wonderful, Mom. Why didn't you tell us? There's a lot I don't tell you anymore, I said, not unkindly. Just as there's a lot you don't tell me. An uncomfortable silence fell between us, filled with all the things left unsaid since Easter. Finally, Sharon picked up the auction brochure from where I'd set it on the table. Will you at least think about the auction? She asked. It's for a good cause. I nodded, walking them to their car. I'll think about it. No promises. After they left, I changed into clothes I'd picked out myself at a boutique in town, colorful, comfortable pieces that the old Donna would have considered too bold. Eleanor arrived 20 minutes later, bringing not just wine but Walter, a silver-haired widower from her book club. Hope you don't mind the extra guest, she said with a wink that wasn't nearly as subtle as she thought. Walter extended his hand. Eleanor speaks highly of your work. I'm looking forward to seeing it. The gallery meeting was held at a converted boathouse at the north end of the lake. Lisa, the owner, had moved from Chicago 5 years ago to establish a space showcasing local artists. When Eleanor had introduced us months ago, I'd never imagined Lisa would express interest in my work. Donna, these new lake studies are exactly what I was hoping for, Lisa said, examining the canvases I'd brought. Raw, emotional, technically interesting. The winter exhibition would feature you and 2 other artists. Opening night is December 15th. The date struck me immediately. December 15th had always been our family Christmas gathering, the event I spent weeks preparing for, cooking everyone's favorite dishes, buying perfectly selected gifts. That's perfect, I heard myself say. Later, over dinner at the Lakeside Cafe, Walter asked about Sharon and Greg's visit. They brought me an opportunity, I said, explaining about the charity auction. Eleanor snorted. Convenient timing. Your first gallery show is announced, and suddenly they want to be involved in your art career. Eleanor, Walter chided gently. Family relationships are complicated. I studied Walter's kind face. You sound like you speak from experience. He nodded. My son didn't speak to me for 3 years after my wife died. He thought I'd moved on too quickly. The truth was, I was drowning in grief and grasping at anything that made me feel alive again. How did you resolve it? I asked. We both took steps toward the middle, he said simply. I acknowledged his pain was real. He eventually saw mine was too. That night, I sat on my dock wrapped in a blanket, thinking about second chances. Not just the second chance I was giving myself, but whether Sharon deserved one too. The auction brochure sat on my lap. Supporting children's art programs, something I genuinely cared about. Was Sharon's involvement a coincidence, Or had she finally seen some part of who I really was? My phone sat heavy in my pocket. After a long moment, I pulled it out and typed a message to Sharon. I'll submit a piece for the auction. But December 15th, I have my own exhibition opening. I'd like you all to be there. Her response came quickly. We wouldn't miss it. I wasn't naive enough to believe a gallery opening would heal all wounds. But perhaps it was a start, a chance for Sharon to see me as I truly was, not just as the mother whose resources she had come to take for granted. The question was whether she'd recognize the woman standing before her, brush in hand, claiming her own life at last. The charity auction fell on the first Saturday in December. I'd submitted a small landscape, nothing like my best work, but something I was willing to part with. The venue was an upscale hotel ballroom in the city, filled with people in formal attire sipping champagne and examining the art pieces displayed around the perimeter. I felt out of place in my simple black dress, even though Eleanor had helped me select it. Elegant, not trying too hard, she'd declared. Walter had offered to accompany me, but I'd declined. This was something I needed to face alone. Sharon spotted me immediately, weaving through the crowd with a practiced social smile. She looked every inch the committee member in her red cocktail dress and pearls. "Mom. You made it," she said, air kissing my cheek. "Your painting is getting a lot of attention. Come see." She led me through the room, introducing me to people whose names I immediately forgot. Greg materialized at her side, charming as ever in his tuxedo. "Donna, you look wonderful," he said, the old warmth in his voice nearly convincing. "Sharon tells me your exhibition is coming along nicely." Before I could respond, Sharon touched my arm. "Mom, there's someone I'd like you to meet." She guided me toward a distinguished-looking man studying my painting. "Lawrence Harmond, this is my mother, Donna Caldwell." "Mom, Lawrence is the director of the Children's Art Foundation we're supporting tonight." The man turned, his eyes crinkling warmly. "Mrs. Caldwell, this piece is remarkable. The emotional depth you've captured is quite moving." I felt myself flush. "Thank you. It's just a hobby, really." "Mom's being modest," Sharon interjected. "She's having her own exhibition opening next week at Lakeside Gallery." I glanced at her, surprised she remembered, let alone mentioned it to others. Lawrence raised his eyebrows. "Is that Lisa Chen's gallery? She has an exceptional eye. I'd love to attend your opening if that wouldn't be imposing." Before I could process this unexpected development, my painting sold for twice the starting bid. Sharon beamed with what appeared to be genuine pride, while Greg worked the room, telling everyone within earshot, "That's my mother-in-law's work." The evening continued in a surreal blend of small talk and champagne. I found myself sharing stories about my art journey with Lawrence, who listened with sincere interest. When Sharon joined us, she added details I hadn't realized she knew. "Mom used to set up her easel on our back porch when I was little," she told Lawrence. "I'd sit beside her with my own little paint set, trying to copy everything she did." The memory caught me off guard, those peaceful mornings before life grew complicated, before John's death and Greg's influence. I'd almost forgotten those days myself. As the evening wound down, Sharon pulled me aside. "Will you come to the house tomorrow? The kids really want to see you. We could have lunch, just family." The invitation hung between us, loaded with unspoken meanings. Just family. As if the last 8 months hadn't happened. As if family still meant what it once had. "I have plans in the morning," I said carefully. "But I could come by around 2. Her face brightened. "Perfect. I'll make that spinach quiche you like." The next day, I drove to their suburban home with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The house looked festive, Christmas decorations already adorning the porch. My grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, rushed out to greet me, their excited chatter filling the awkward space that had grown between the adults. "Grandma, did you really sell a painting for $1,000? Emma asked, eyes wide. "And are you really going to be famous?" Tyler added. I laughed despite myself. "Not famous, just having some fun doing what I love." Sharon served lunch on her formal china, the set I'd given them as a housewarming gift years ago. Greg was noticeably subdued, watching me with careful consideration rather than his usual forced charm. After the meal, Sharon suggested the children show me their rooms. Alone with my grandchildren, I relaxed, genuinely enjoying their stories and artwork. Emma, now 12, had inherited my artistic streak. She showed me sketches that revealed real talent. "Mom says you can teach me to paint properly," she said, eyes hopeful. "She says you're really good." A knock at the door interrupted us. I turned to see Sharon, leaning against the doorframe. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, nodding toward her bedroom. We sat on the edge of her bed, like we used to during her teenage years when our talks felt easier, more honest. "I want to apologize," she began, her voice uncertain. "Not just for what happened at Easter, but for everything before that. For taking you for granted." I waited, not making it easier for her. "When Dad died, you were so strong, handling everything, helping us with the kids, with money when we needed it. I started seeing you as this resource, I guess. Not as a person with your own dreams." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then when you left and started painting again, building this whole new life without us, I realized how much I'd missed. How much of you I'd forgotten." "What about Greg?" I asked, the question that had plagued me for months. Sharon sighed. "We've been in counseling. What he said that day, it was wrong, but it wasn't just him. I'd been treating you the same way, just less directly." For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her face. Not just for getting caught, but for the pattern itself. As we rejoined the others, Greg handed me an envelope. "Sharon and I want you to have this." Inside was a check, a substantial one. "The money you gave us for the cabin," Sharon explained. "It wasn't a gift, it was an investment in our family. We're paying it back, with interest." I studied them both, seeing something shift beneath the surface. Not complete transformation, but perhaps the beginning of one. That evening, as I prepared to leave, Emma asked, "Will you come to my school concert next week? It's the day after your art show." I wouldn't miss it, I promised. Driving back to the lake house under a sky full of stars, I called Walter. "How was the family reunion?" he asked. "Surprising," I answered truthfully. "Not perfect, but different." "Coming back to the book club tonight?" "Eleanor's making that awful punch everyone pretends to like." I smiled. "Save me a seat." At the lake house, I checked my exhibition pieces one last time before Lisa would collect them tomorrow. 10 paintings that told the story of my awakening. My phone pinged with a message from Sharon. "Thank you for today. We're all looking forward to your opening night." I set the phone down and stood by the window, looking out at the moonlight on the water. The woman reflected in the glass looked back with clear eyes. She knew that reconciliation would be a long road, not a single afternoon. That trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. But she also knew something else, that the family she was creating now included both old bonds being carefully rewoven and new connections forged in the fire of her rebirth. The night of my exhibition opening arrived with an unexpected December snowfall. Thick flakes drifted past the gallery windows, turning Lakeside Drive into a scene from a Christmas card. Lisa had transformed the space, positioning my paintings under perfect lighting that made the colors sing. "Ready?" Eleanor asked, adjusting the collar on my jacket, a deep blue velvet piece I'd splurged on for this occasion. "As I'll ever be," I replied, watching people begin to arrive through the frosted windows. Walter squeezed my hand. "They're going to love your work, Donna. Because it's honest." The gallery filled quickly. Friends from the lake community, fellow artists from my workshops, curious locals drawn by Lisa's reputation for discovering talent. I moved among them, explaining my inspirations, accepting compliments with a grace I was still learning. When the gallery door opened an hour into the event, admitting a gust of cold air and a familiar cluster of faces, my heart skipped. Sharon, Greg, and the children entered, along with Lawrence from the charity auction and, to my surprise, my sister Margaret. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Margaret said, embracing me. "Though I still can't believe my practical sister is having an art show." "Life is full of surprises," I replied, meeting Sharon's eyes over Margaret's shoulder. My daughter approached tentatively, as if unsure of her welcome in this new territory of mine. "Mom, these are incredible," she said, gesturing toward the collection. "I mean, I knew you painted, but this." She paused before my centerpiece, a large canvas showing a woman standing alone on a dock, facing a storm across the lake. "This one especially. I can feel it." Emma tugged at my hand. "Grandma, is that you in the painting?" I smiled down at her. "In a way. It's who I became." Greg hung back, studying each painting with unexpected attention. When he finally approached, his usual smooth confidence was absent. "You're talented, Donna. Really talented." "Thank you, Greg," I said, meaning it. Lisa clinked a glass, gathering everyone's attention. "I'd like to introduce tonight's featured artist, Donna Caldwell, whose Reflections on Awakening series has already generated significant interest. 3 pieces sold during the preview, and I'm delighted to announce that the Harmon Foundation has purchased the centerpiece for their permanent collection." Applause filled the room as Lawrence stepped forward. Mrs. Caldwell's work speaks to resilience and rebirth, themes central to our foundation's mission of helping children discover themselves through art. I blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by the moment. Just 9 months ago, I'd been a widow defined by what I could provide to others. Now strangers were finding meaning in the visual language of my journey. After Lisa's speech, Sharon approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "I think this calls for a toast," she said, handing me one. "To new beginnings." We moved to a quiet corner as the crowd mingled around the gallery. "I almost didn't invite you," I admitted. "I wasn't sure you'd understand what this means to me." Sharon's eyes softened. "I didn't, not at first. But I've been trying to see you, really see you, these past few months." She took a breath. "When you left after Easter, I was angry. I thought you were being dramatic, punishing us. But then I started finding these old photos of you painting, of us doing art projects together. I remembered who you were before you became just Mom, or Grandma, or Dad's widow." "And who was that?" I asked quietly. "Someone creative. Independent. Strong." She looked down. "Someone I stopped seeing because it was easier to just take what you offered without thinking about what you needed." We were interrupted by Tyler's excited voice. "Grandma. Someone else bought one of your paintings." The lady put a red dot on it. The evening continued in a blur of conversations and congratulations. Eleanor introduced Walter to Sharon, who seemed genuinely pleased I had a gentleman friend. Margaret cornered Greg in what appeared to be a serious conversation that left him looking thoughtful. The children proudly told everyone within earshot that I was their grandmother. As the event wound down, Lisa approached with a folder. "Final sales tally," she said, showing me a figure that made my eyes widen. "And 3 commissions, if you're interested." Later, as the gallery emptied, I found myself standing before the centerpiece painting, now marked with a prestigious red dot. Lawrence appeared beside me. "This piece will inspire many young artists in our program," he said. "Your journey from darkness to light, from storm to calm, it's universal." "It's just my story," I said simply. "The best art always is," he replied. Outside, the snow had transformed the world. My family waited by their car, the children making snow angels on the sidewalk. "We're taking Mom out for a celebration dinner," Sharon announced to Walter and Eleanor. "You're both welcome to join us." As we walked toward the restaurant, Emma slipped her mitten-covered hand into mine. "Will you teach me to paint storms like yours?" "I'll teach you to paint anything you want," I promised. "But I hope you have fewer storms to paint than I did." The restaurant was warm and festive, Christmas lights twinkling overhead. As we settled around the table, my old family and new friends together, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with the success of the exhibition. Greg raised his glass. To Donna, and her incredible talent. And to family, Sharon added softly, in all its forms. Later that night, back at the lake house, I sat at my desk and opened my safe. The envelope containing my will, the document that had started everything when I read it aloud that Easter Sunday, lay inside. I removed it carefully, along with a fresh sheet of paper. There were amendments to be made, not out of anger this time, but from wisdom. The trust for my grandchildren's education would remain. Sharon and Greg's portion would be adjusted, not removed, but structured to reflect our evolving relationship. But the most important changes wouldn't be financial. On the blank page, I began writing a letter to accompany my will. My dearest family. What I leave behind is more than money or property. It's the understanding that we are never too old to rediscover ourselves, never too settled to begin again. The greatest inheritance I can give you is not what's in my bank account, but what I've learned about living authentically. To Emma and Tyler, may you always know your worth comes from within, not from what you own or who approves of you. Your grandmother discovered this truth late in life. I hope you carry it with you from the beginning. To Sharon and Greg, our relationship has weathered profound challenges. The healing we've begun is more valuable than any material inheritance. Continue this work, not for my sake, but for your own. And to those I've met in this new chapter, Eleanor, Walter, Lisa, and others who saw me when I was invisible even to myself, you've taught me that family is sometimes found rather than born. My final testament is this: live fully. Love authentically. Create boldly. Accept nothing less than being truly seen. With all my love, Donna. I sealed the letter, then moved to the window. The snow had stopped, revealing a sky full of stars reflected perfectly in the still lake below, two worlds mirroring each other, both equally real, equally beautiful. At 60, I had discovered that inheritance wasn't just what you left behind, it was also what you claimed for yourself. The right to reinvention. The courage to be seen. The wisdom to distinguish between those who valued what you could give and those who cherished who you truly were. These were gifts no one could take away, not with a whispered comment, not with manipulation, not with guilt. And they were gifts I could pass on, not just after I was gone, but with every day I lived authentically from this moment forward.